Good morning. Welcome to the 2016 Constitutional Week Conference on Justice Scalia and his legacy in the Supreme Court. We're just delighted to see everyone here. I see some familiar faces from my classes, and I also understand that we have guests from junior high here as well in the back, so thank you all for coming. We're going to get started right away here because our time is precious. And so I'm just going to briefly just turn it over to the new director of the Center for Constitutional Studies, Rodney Smith.
Thank you very much, Andy, and thank you for everyone that's put this wonderful event together. This is perhaps my favorite season of the year, not simply because I love the fall, but also because of what we celebrate and what we're celebrating today. And I can't think of a better person to help us with that celebration than Professor Akhil Reed Amar. I'm not here to push his book, but I am. It's available, I'm told. It is newly published, so its title really fits for all of us. It is The Constitution Today. So a wonderful piece on his part. He is a professor of law and political science at Yale University, and that means he teaches both at the law school and he teaches at Yale College, meaning he also teaches undergraduates. So he will relate wonderfully with you. He has won distinguished teaching awards, so I'm excited to be taught by Akhil today. And now that you have seen him, you'll see him regularly on television. If you do wonderful things like read the New York Times and other major publications, you'll see things that are written, opinion and other pieces by Professor Amar. So he has done wonderful things. Now this one is really for this part of the introduction. I'm blessed to have my wife here with me. One of our favorite shows, we wept when it ended, was The West Wing, and Professor Amar actually was involved in helping it to be realistic. He's also, I should say, he's here also. We're also blessed to have his colleague, Professor Jack Balkin, with us, and he'll be with us later today. So we're really leaning on Yale's faculty. What I want to close with, because you're not here to hear me, you are here to hear Professor Amar. If you're an intrepid soul, you can stay later and hear me. What I want to say is that I think as much as anyone in this generation, Professor Amar captures what I refer to as the aspirations of the framers, the founding generation, which is and I am so grateful for his work. Professor Amar.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Such an honor to be with you, and now I actually, the camera's being turned around and I can see you, and wave your hands if you can see and hear me. Okay, I see you back. Happy birthday. Not just because this is the 75th anniversary, I'm told, of Utah Valley's homecoming, which is very special, but because this week, as we do every year in mid-September, we celebrate the birthday of the Constitution. This is Constitution Week. And just as July 2nd and July 4th mark the birthday of America, independence was actually declared on July 2nd, and the Declaration of Independence was adopted on July 4th in 1776. So that's a birthday of American independence. But above and beyond that, we also want to celebrate the birthday of this extraordinary document, the Constitution. And here I get to pull out my copy and show it to you. Why September? What's up with the birthday? And then moving from the truly sublime, the Constitution, to the ridiculous, it's also, as has just been mentioned, the literal birthday of this new book, The Constitution Today, because it was just born this week, and I want to share it with you. So why do we celebrate the birthday of the Constitution? Why in September? Why is this significant? Here's the point. In the world, if you look at it from a secular point of view, there is indeed BC and AD, and that would be before the Constitution and after the document. And why? So there is a year in which modernity is born, in which the modern world is born, a world of democracy, of free speech, of religious pluralism, and that these big ideas that are capturing the world, they are actually, that world is basically born in a certain time and place. It's made in America. It's born in America. That's the place. And the time is 1787-88. And we mark the beginning in September, which is the moment at which the Constitution is introduced to the public. Not in May of 1787, when people start meeting behind closed doors to draft a plan. That's all secret stuff. No, the birthday of the document really is when, for the first time in world history, a document is unveiled, is made public, is published for a Republican people. It's the same root word, people and public. When publishers make public this document, in mid-September 1787, when the closed proceedings of the Philadelphia Convention are in fact opened up, and what's proposed is, here is a plan that is to be deliberated upon and voted upon by the American citizenry, by the entire continent. In a phrase, we, the people of the United States, that's what that first sentence is all about, are going to get to decide how we and our posterity, that's us today in this room, are going to be governed. And that began mid-September 1787. I call it the hinge of human history, the year that changed everything. And I tell a little bit of that story in this book, and I'm going to come back to this book from time to time and try to connect all of that to what's happening today, this season, this election season, this year. But first, let's develop a little bit of constitutional perspective. So let's look at what the world was like in August of 1787, or if you prefer, in August of 1786, or 1785, or 1685, or 1585, or all the 85s all the way back into the recesses of time. Here's the reality. Before the Constitution is put to a vote, is made public and put to a vote, well, let's look at that month, September. Democracy, that would be self-government, a regime in which people basically govern themselves, exists in very few places on the planet outside of America. The British have some form of self-government. They have a House of Commons and jury trial, but they have an unelected monarch who doesn't merely reign, but actually rules. It's much more powerful than today's figurehead monarch. An unelected king actually picks prime ministers and decides on war and peace. They have an unelected House of Lords that has real power, and you have to be born into it. It's not based on merit like Sir Elton or Sir Mick or Sir Paul. There's just today's House of Lords. You have to just be born into it, and it has a real power. They've got an established church that has real authority, a hereditary monarch, but they have some self-government in Britain. They have a House of Commons, although very few people are actually eligible to serve in the House of Commons. But they have some elections from time to time. They have jury trial. The Swiss are largely self-governing. But it's a tiny little place. There are no cities. There are no banks. Mitt Romney is not interested in them yet because they don't have any real commerce to speak of. They're goat herders. Think about early Utah, let's say, rather than today's Salt Lake City. And the Dutch are in the process of losing their self-government, and that's it. In the entire world, outside of America, a little bit of self-government in Britain, a little bit in Switzerland, the Dutch are in the process of losing it. That's it. Everywhere else is basically despotism. And so it has always been for much of recorded history. A tiny few little democracies have made a go of it for a little bit, but they've flickered out. Ancient Athens under the Cleisthenic constitution, hundreds of years before Christ, in Periclean Athens, pre-imperial Rome, Florence. Democracy has worked for certain tiny little slivers of time and space in little city-states, way smaller than Salt Lake City, for example. 30,000 people maybe in Athens, and these people worship the same god or gods. They speak the same language. They have the same culture and climate. They're not warm weather and cold weather people getting together. They're not multiple time zones, and still they're not able to make a go of it. They can't really overcome internal dissension and repel external attack, and these democracies basically collapse. The glory that was ancient Athens, or pre-imperial Republican Rome will succumb to a Caesar and an empire. Florence will flicker out. The history of the world in the Russias, in China, in India, in Africa, in Eastern Europe, in Western Europe, throughout the world, the history of the world is a history of kings, emperors, czars, sultans, Mughal lords, tribal chieftains, thugs, all, and very little democracy. And then, in this year that changed everything, whose birthday we celebrate this week, we, the people of the United States, did in fact begin a process by which we ordained and established the Constitution. That's what that first sentence means. We, the people, do ordain and establish the Constitution. We're going to get to do something. We're going to get to vote on this thing. Up and down a whole continent. That had never happened before. Even the democracies that had existed before. And we're not talking about a tiny little city state. We're talking about from Maine, which was part of Massachusetts, down to Georgia, a whole continent. And even the ancient democracies had never had fully democratic constitution-making procedures. Typically, one man claiming a pipeline to God, in effect, handed down the law, the lawgiver, a Moses, a Solon, and the like. But we're actually going to vote on this thing. That hadn't happened. The British, they have some self-government, but they had never reduced their regime to a single text that an ordinary farmer could read. And they never even voted on their system of government, which is more customary, by Parliament, much less by the British people. The Declaration of Independence, not put to a vote in 1776. None of the state constitutions in 1776 were put to a vote. Articles of Confederation was not put to a vote. And now they've come up with first principles. They put it in a short document that ordinary people can read. It's not short so that judges can make stuff up. It's short so that ordinary people then and now can read it and decide whether they're for it or against it, whether they want to amend it or not, or how, whether they're going to ratify it in this year that changes everything, this hinge of human history. That's the birthday we celebrate today. And the world will never be the same. It really is like BC and AD, because I told you what the history of the world was before this magic moment, this hinge of human history, that year changes everything. Now I want you just to think about your world, the world of the 21st century, the modern world, a world in which half the planet now by population and landmass is democratic. On the American model, on the model of this document, half the world now has well, let me just, for example, take my parents, India. When they were born, they're still alive. They were ruled by an unelected British monarch and an unelected parliament that no Indian got to vote for, just as the American revolutionaries were. That's in their life when they were born. And today, India has a written constitution and free and fair elections and multiple political parties and freedom of speech and a rule of law, and these parties alternate in power, and there's religious toleration, and people are not demonized because they're Muslims or because they're Hindus or Christians or whatever. How extraordinary, or Mormons for that matter? How extraordinary is that on missions? How extraordinary is that? And that's on the American model. That's a billion with a B. people, an entire subcontinent, every bit as vast as all of Europe in language and culture, governing themselves on the American model. And not just India, all of Western Europe. And at the time of the Constitution, you see France is governed by an absolutist monarch, King Louis. And now it's a self-governing republic. It's not bad. It's almost as good as California, which is basically its counterpart. California has actually, I think, a better GDP and more religious toleration than France does, because France actually, stuff that's happening in America is having a bad effect elsewhere, and the creeping religious intolerance that we are seeing today in this season is having a bad effect in France and elsewhere. So I actually rank California on issues of religious toleration and inclusion higher than France, but France is a self-governing republic, and so is Spain's, so is Italy, and so is Germany, and that wasn't true at the time of the Constitution. Those nation states didn't even exist, but the places that today are Italy and Germany and the like weren't self-governing. And not just Western Europe, but Eastern Europe. They're regimes, they're confronting challenges, but they're democratic regimes struggling to make a go of it in Poland, in Hungary, in Ukraine. It's not just in Europe, it's south of our border. Mexico is a republic and a fledgling democracy in a way that it really wasn't 40 years ago. It now has alternating parties in power. And this, I claim, is because of the United States Constitution, because the political, legal, military, cultural, and social success of this project, a year that changed everything, hinge of human history. There was no democracy before 1787 of any real sort, and then we, the people of the United States, did in fact ordain and establish a constitution, and now the world is half democratic. We won the last century, we democracies. And I like our odds going forward if we stay true to our values, which are values that are universal. They're not just America first. They're values of international human rights and equality for all, and religious toleration, which I hope, especially my friends in Utah, understand the importance of respect for minority and dissenting religions. It's a very profound principle. And we won the last century. We defeated the forces. We, the United States Constitutional Project, the last best hope of Earth, defeated Nazism and fascism and Stalinism. And I like our odds going forward if we stay true to the values. That's what we celebrate today. Okay, happy birthday. The world is becoming increasingly American. And what we do matters to the rest of the world, so we have to be on our best behavior always, because we are a light unto the world at our best. And America, contrary-wise, and then I'm going to tell you a little bit, just a bit about today, the world is becoming more American, and America is becoming more global. We are the unique nation in the world of any real size and significance where the grandchildren and the great-grandchildren of all the other peoples of the world come together and meet and try to work together and understand each other. That's not true in Germany. That's not true in France. They are not the crossroads of the world. America is. And many of our great universities, you see where that begins to happen, which is why I would never want to ban people of any religion from coming to the United States. I want them to come and study here, and we can learn from them, and they can learn from us. This is a deeply personal story for me. I have such passion for the Constitution because on the day, speaking of birthdays, that I am born, this document makes me a citizen of the United States. I'm born in Ann Arbor, Michigan, and the document doesn't ask if my parents are citizens or not. Or frankly, even if they're here legally. Now, happily they were, but even if they hadn't been, this document makes me a citizen of the United States because I'm born here. That's the first sentence of the 14th Amendment. It gives me that gift of birthright citizenship on the day that I'm born, and I've never forgotten that birthday gift on my birthday, and that's why I have this passion for this constitutional project. Um, uh, and the American, but where was I born? I was born in Ann Arbor, Michigan. Why there? Because there's a great university there. And my parents, who were born in undivided India, did not meet in undivided India. They met here in the good old US of A at Ann Arbor, Michigan. They were students there, medical students. They did their residency there, and that's where I'm born. And my story isn't unique. Barack Obama's parents, you see, they meet at a great American university, and one parent descends from Europe and one parent descends from Africa, and they meet here in the United States in a very cosmopolitan, polyglot place, Hawaii. And the product of that is an only in America child, Barack Hussein Obama. Pretty extraordinary story, you see, because uniquely in the world, you do not, that happens in Germany, but much more rarely. That people from different parts of the planet come to Germany, maybe from even and meet and form these connections. The world's greatest universities are here in America. It's not just that the world is becoming more American. America is becoming more global. And three places that see this, especially if you ask me, are New York City, which is a crossroads of the world. It's where the United Nations is. I grew up in San Francisco, which is where the United Nations was actually, the charter was written. Thanks very much. This is a very full service operation here. The dean of the law school is giving me some water. He also happens to be my kid brother. I'm talking to you from Illinois, another great university founded by in the tradition of Abraham Lincoln, creating these great public universities where people can meet and learn. A third city that really has a global vision, since I'm talking to you all, let me be candid. San Francisco is where North meets South, an Anglo culture meets an Hispanic culture, where East meets West, a Pacific Asian culture meets a European culture. Hi to my friend Ralph Rossum. I think I'm seeing him there in the front row. Yep, I am seeing him there. And Southern California too. I'm a Northern California kid, but I could say the same thing about the Claremont colleges and Los Angeles. I could say it about New York and Washington D.C. I could say it about Salt Lake City, because Salt Lake City uniquely is thinking about the rest of the world and the connection between America and the rest of the world. Okay, so that's the story that we celebrate today. Now I want to tell you about why this particular moment is especially significant, literally the Constitution today. Let me just say one more thing by way of linking it, because journalists, from the French word jour, are always thinking about what's happening today, this minute, this moment, this second. They're men of the present. And historians might think about the past, and I think we're back connected. Think about the past, but historians are often very hesitant to. And next time you stop hearing me, start waving your hands, because I can see you even if you can't see and hear me. So if it happens, just wave your hands. But historians, they'll say, well, we need to understand the past, but we're not going to tell you who Thomas Jefferson was going to vote for. That's not the game we play. We just want to understand the past for its own sake. Okay. And journalists have no sense of history because they're about what's happening now. But we constitutionalists, we think deeply about the past in order to understand the present and map the future. That's what we do. We barrel down the freeway by looking in the rearview mirror very carefully. It's a funny way to drive, but that's how we do it. We think about what happened at the founding for its lessons for today. Who would Thomas Jefferson vote for? Yes, because we have to decide for plaintiff or defendant. We have to decide for Trump or Clinton. We have to decide yes or no on Garland, and which would be more faithful to the principles that were encoded a long time ago, and principles we're going to have to live with a long time hence. Constitutions have a different sense of time. So let me just connect this to the last election, what I just said, and now talk about why the current election is such an interesting moment. You live in such an interesting time. At the time the Constitution was adopted, this year that changed everything, America is an overwhelmingly mainstream Protestant country, right? And yet, think about the last presidential election. 4 people ran for president and vice president. The only mainstream Protestant among those 4 is named Barack Hussein Obama. See, because Paul Ryan's a Catholic and Joe Biden's a Catholic, and Mitt Romney is a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, which wasn't a dominant mainstream religion at the time of the founding. And I'm so proud of us that we did not make a big deal of it as a country. That what I'm telling you just precisely because it wasn't a big deal. Good for us that we're not calling attention to whether that Ben Carson is a Seventh-day Adventist, or because one person who's running is trying to call attention to this, and this makes me nervous today. And how many evangelicals come from Cuba and all the rest? Oh, I don't like that, because I think the Constitution has created this multi-religious, multicultural project open to all. There were 9 justices on the Supreme Court before Justice Scalia's passing, and of course you'll hear more about Justice Scalia throughout the course of today. But before his passing on the court, 6 Catholics, 3 Jews, not a single mainstream Protestant, and no one's making a big deal of it. That's wonderful that no one's making a big deal of it. Merrick Garland, were he to be confirmed, it would be 5 Catholics and 4 Jews, and no one is hopping up and down about that. And the House of Representatives, the Speaker is Paul Ryan, Catholic. John Boehner was Catholic. No one made a big deal about that. Harry Reid, when he was Majority Leader, Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, people aren't making a big deal of that. Mitch McConnell, is that Catholic or Protestant? Turns out it's Protestant, but we don't care about it so much. Very impressive. This year that changed everything, adopted a constitution in which there's no religious test for the presidency. And indeed, religious tests are prohibited by the document. And that was news in the world because all of the states had religious tests except for Virginia, and almost all of them had religious tests built into their state constitutions themselves. And what an example we are to the rest of the world. So that now India, for example, which is not a predominantly Muslim country, it's a predominantly Hindu country, has had Muslim presidents. Not prime ministers yet, but presidents and Supreme Court justices and generals and admirals and maybe even admirals and maybe even most important of all, national soccer team players, because apparently that's important over there. So we are a light unto the world in what we do, and it matters. Now, here's why the current election is so interesting. It's not just that I think we've never seen anyone quite without a history of government service, by which, of course, I include military service, being possibly becoming president. Every single president until now has a distinguished history of public service. We've only had one presidential nominee who didn't have that. That was Wendell Willkie, major presidential nominee. But it's not just that. It's not just that I think he's saying stuff that hasn't been said before and stuff, frankly, that troubles me about religious equality and other matters. But here's why it's also so interesting, and here I'll close. We are living at a time. Some of you think that the Constitution is all about courts. But when you look at this document, and I urge you to read it, you'll see that Article 3, the judiciary, is 3rd out of 3. And you'll see that presidents are supposed to pick justices, and justices aren't supposed to pick presidents, which is why Bush versus Gore is such a problematic case. Although I'm so grateful that the middle schoolers are here. I was taught in middle school that the most important constitutional decision ever was Marbury versus Madison. I don't even think it's the most important constitutional decision of 1803. Because I understand now that constitutional decisions are not just made by courts, but by presidents and congresses, which declare war. And you know what the most important constitutional decision of 1803 actually was? It was Thomas Jefferson's decision to acquire Louisiana, without which there's no state of Utah or state of California. That's a big one. Original versus appellate jurisdiction and mandamus, which is what Marbury is about, not so much. Big things often presidents decide, like the decision to resist secession by force of arms. That's Lincoln's decision and his unilaterally, a decision to free the slaves with a stroke of a pen in the Emancipation Proclamation. And even if you think courts are the be-all and end-all, the decision to nominate justices and judges. Presidents do that. So I want you to pay attention to all 3 branches, and now you can see why today is such a special season? Because not since the age of Lincoln have all four major institutions of federal power been in play, up for grabs, been up for sort of partisan determination. Here's what I mean. In this election, the House, the Senate, the presidency, and the judiciary are all in play in a way that's almost never true. That's what makes this election so fraught. And with the judiciary, it's because of the passing of Justice Scalia, which is part of the occasion of today's conversation. So come January, you could have the Republicans controlling everything. President Donald Trump. And if he wins, I think he probably wins the Senate. And if he wins the Senate, that means it will be a Republican filling the vacancy on the Supreme Court. And that's because it's now balanced 4-4. It would be a Republican on the Supreme Court. So Republicans would control the presidency and the Senate and the judiciary. And probably it's pretty overwhelming if they win those, if they're going to maintain control of the House. That could happen in January. Or it's also possible, it's within the window of possibility at this moment. It's realistic to imagine Hillary Clinton, the Democrats, could capture the presidency and take back the Senate. And if that happens, they definitely get the judiciary. And now the judiciary will be 5-4 Democrat appointee, because right now it's 4-4. And it's possible even that the Democrats could take back the House if they win very big. And that's a very different one. And the Supreme Court has been dominated by Republican appointees for my entire adult lifetime since 1970, and now it's 4-4. Now it's in play. It's in the balance. And very rarely in the history of America has that been so. I'm just going to go on for 3 more minutes, and then I think I want to get you into the conversation very quickly. But let me just tell you how actually this amazing planetary alignment where House, Senate, presidency, and judiciary are all up for grabs, how that hasn't been true basically since the era of Lincoln. We have informally a two-party system. The Constitution doesn't feature a lot of mentions of political parties, but we have two parties that alternate in power, and we've had the same two parties since Lincoln's era, and it's Republicans and Democrats. So no more Whigs, no more Federalists and Anti-Federalists. And Lincoln is the first Republican president, and when he's running in 1860, he could win the presidency, he in fact does, and he could win the House and win the Senate, but he's never going to control the judiciary in those first 4 years because the judiciary is packed with nominees from basically the Democrat Party, which has been the dominant party, winning again and again and again in Jacksonian America. Andy Jackson wins twice, Martin Van Buren wins, James Polk wins, Franklin Pierce wins, James Buchanan wins. Those are all basically Jacksonian Democrats, and they stock the court. The Whigs, the anti-Jackson party, have won, but the Whig presidents keep dying, and they don't really get to appoint very many people to the court. So Lincoln's not going to be able to turn the court around. It's rigged. It's stacked against him 8-1-7-2 when he takes office, and he's not going to be able to turn that around. Now, in his second term, maybe things are really up for grabs because he's now had some appointments. Some people have left. And he could win the presidency and the House and the Senate and maybe control the court, or this was to remind me to be quiet. But since we lost 5 minutes, I'm just going to go 4 more minutes here, and then we're done. But the world is completely different. So Lincoln could win it all in 1964. The tall, skinny constitutional lawyer from Illinois named Lincoln, or the other party could prevail. And if it prevails, it's an entirely different world. I have a totally different view of the rights of Black people and the relationship to the Confederacy and our relationship to the world. The fellow running against him is a narcissist, a very successful business person with strong ties to New Jersey. He owns a lot of casinos there. No, that last thing wasn't true. But everything else, he reminds McClellan. And I'm glad that Lincoln won and not McClellan. Totally different world. And that was the last time when everything was up for grabs in such a big way. House, Senate, presidency judiciary. Why was that last time? Until your lifetime. You seventh graders, you're living in an amazing time, because here's what happens. Lincoln wins, thank goodness, because the Union prevails. We carry Atlanta, and with that, actually, Lincoln wins, and his successors win again and again and again. The Democrat Party, Jackson's party, which was the dominant political party in America, basically has become repudiated. Because of slavery and secession and segregation. And this party, which had won again and again and again before Lincoln is the first Republican to win. This party doesn't win a popular majority for the presidency all the way until FDR. Grover Cleveland never wins a popular majority. And doesn't win even consecutive terms. Neither does Woodrow Wilson. So it's Lincolnian presidents in his tradition, 2 terms of Grant, Rutherford B. Hayes, James Garfield, and Chester Arthur, Benjamin Harrison, William McKinley, Teddy Roosevelt. So when these guys are winning again and again and again, and Harding and Coolidge, when the Democrats win on rare occasions, they're not going to be able to turn the Supreme Court over, because the Supreme Court is stocked basically with Republican appointees. So the court is not in play in this period. When Roosevelt sweeps into office in 1932, Franklin Roosevelt, he's going to carry the House and the Senate, but he's not going to be able to turn the court around because it's stocked basically with Republican appointees. So the court is not quite in play. He doesn't even get a single appointment his first term. Eventually, the people on the court are going to leave, and he's going to be able to replenish them, and the court is in play. But by that point, he's got such overwhelming majorities in Congress that the Congress really isn't in play after Roosevelt. And for most of the following era, there's a little moment when it's in play under Dwight Eisenhower, but Dwight Eisenhower, the presidency isn't in play. And he gets to appoint some folks, and now maybe the court is in play, and sometimes the Congress is in play, but Dwight Eisenhower wins re-election by 15 points. The presidency is, and in a rematch against Adlai Stevenson, the presidency is not up for grabs. And by the time Eisenhower's administration ends, the Democrats have overwhelming control in House or Senate or both, like 2-to-1 majorities in these places. And so it's a totally Democrat Congress, basically, under John Kennedy, Lyndon Johnson, Richard Nixon, Gerald Ford, Jimmy Carter, Ronald Reagan, George H.W. Bush, Bill Clinton. And then there's the Gingrich Revolution, in which actually now the Congress is back in play. And it's gone back and forth since Gingrich, and the House has gone back and forth, and the Senate and the presidency, but the court has been controlled by Republicans since 1970, and it's really only the last election with the possibility there might be a vacancy, and there was, Justice Scalia's passing, and this election when the court is in play. So really, it's not your lifetime, that last election and this one. This is what makes the Constitution today so special. Because it's not just about judges. It's about all the branches of government, and all the branches of the federal government are in play today in a way that's never been, true really until since the age of Lincoln. Utah wasn't even a state the last time, we had this kind of partisan planetary alignment. It's an exciting time to be alive for those of us like me who actually think that one of the 2 candidates is very scary from a constitutional point of view on issues like religious equality. There's an additional layer of suspense in this thing. I hope I've said enough to get you really excited about the Constitution's birthday, about this project that changed all of world history. And I hope I've also gotten you excited about the present moment. It's not just that we're celebrating some, old guy's birthday or something like that, because the Constitution has to be renewed for every generation. That renewal travels through elections, and in this election, uniquely, really all the branches, in effect, are on the ballot in a way that's not always true. And I hope I've said enough to get your juices going. I would love to hear your questions and comments. So I think it's your turn now. Thank you very much.
Thank you so
Here, here.
much, Reed. Or Akhil.
God bless.